Okay, everyone, I would say we get started. I would like to welcome everyone to our product showcase presentation, Fluid Applied Air Barriers, presented by 475 High Performance Building Supply, which provides specialized and innovative products for the low energy passive house building sector. I would like to thank 475 for your support as a New York Passive House sponsor, which makes today's presentation possible. So thanks for your support. It is my pleasure to introduce Jose Sosa, who is a New York Passive House volunteer and will lead today's sessions. So Jose, please take it away.
Thanks, Andreas. My name is Jose Sosa. I am a Passive House certified consultant, and I am happy to be one of the volunteers in New York Passive House, in charge of bringing you all of these nice products. It is my pleasure to welcome Aaron McCormack, Technical Manager of 475 High Performance Building Supply. Aaron has extensive experience in technical engineering with demonstrated history of working in the building materials industry. And we are very excited that 475 is presenting details on the new AEROFIXX application tool for liquid applied air barriers becoming available this March. And with that, I'll leave it to Aaron. Take it away.
Yeah, so as Jose said, I'm Aaron McCormack. I'm the technical manager of 475. Any technical issues or new products, that sort of thing, I deal with that, or deal with projects throughout the country. I get to see quite a broad range of different applications and climate zones and all that sort of thing. So it's pretty fun, and it's great to be here as a sponsor with New York Passive House. So thank you very much for having us on. Just quickly about 475, I'm sure most of the people on this webinar probably know 475, given that it's New York. This is actually 475's 10th year in existence. I think New York Passive House is the same. The company was initially founded by Ken Levinson, who's now the executive director of North American Passive House Network, and Floris Keverling-Boozman. I actually think they met at maybe a New York Passive House event, and that's how all this came about. We are the exclusive European partners of the Proclima system, which is it's a German product, but we also have various other different partnerships, including Lunos, decentralized ventilation, Gutex wood fiber insulation, Lamilux, skylights, and plenty more. If you're looking for any more information on those, just call onto our website, have a look, give us a buzz, and we can talk you through all of it. Website is basically where all our knowledge is, any spec sheets, anything that I referred to here today, you're going to be able to find it all on the website, but you can also place orders on there. We are an e-commerce company, so whatever you're looking for, you can head to the website first, and then you can give us a call. Today's presentation is about VISCONN. It's basically a liquid applied air barrier. It serves some other functions, but for the most part, we kind of consider it purely an air barrier. It has a whole lot of different applications. You can apply it in various different ways depending on what your air barrier strategy is. Some people just like to have a bucket of it lying around, and they'll paint on wherever they think there's some gaps or some holes. But for the most part, it's used as a single air barrier strategy. Masonry walls is a huge kind of application area. So the external walls of passive houses are kind of the Brooklyn brownstones that we see here a lot. There's also a lot of tricky details like floor transitions, anywhere where a joist meets timber, the kind of place that you don't really want to spend too much time taping. There's also some other applications like the wood fiber flashing. So for our Gutex product, it's used as the water barrier on your sill, around your windows. It's also very easy to spray over like different connections. So on CLT connector pieces, you can literally just apply it over the whole connection, and then it's all sealed up. Other people will use it for services as well. If they have like some pipe work going through a floor and they don't want to tape it, or they didn't get a chance to put in some gaskets, then they can literally just paint it on. The different types of applications, or the methods, it can be, you can literally open up the can, stick a brush into it and paint it on. You can get a roller, or for larger projects, you would use an airless sprayer. So all three methods are acceptable. The different substrates, as I already said, the wood fiber, It can go straight onto it. OSB, plywood, any sheathing, any timber material, basically. It can go onto concrete. It can go onto metal, onto plastic. This is just a quick example of the transition between two different materials and how easy it can be done. You can see here it's the wall to floor junction where they had an airless sprayer on site and they were able to just spray the connection pretty quickly. The time saved in comparison to taping that is pretty significant. And this picture here on the right hand side is a CLT project where they initially were taping. You can see the tape along the top there, and then where the other structural pieces came and they already had VISCONN on site, it was much easier to just go and spray everything. The floor transition details, it's one of those details where everyone struggles with, or it's so tedious to tape around floor joists, trying to get some membrane in there in between each bay, and then having to tape it and not having something solid to really bond to behind it. So it can be pretty tricky. We have found people will just buy a couple of buckets and just do the floor details, and then they'll worry about their wall assemblies and trying to connect it afterwards. But you can see here on the photo on the left, the entire wall was done, so they were obviously just going to spray completely around the joist. They weren't going to consider any other option. And then on the top right hand side, a different wall assembly was taken, or different primary air barrier, I guess, but it was integrated with the VISCONN around the floor joist to help streamline the application, I guess, the installation of the air barrier. With these masonry walls, it's kind of, for Europeans, being Irish, it's kind of a strange enough application for a liquid applied membrane. It's specifically kind of America that has kind of taken off with liquid applied membranes to be used on walls. Most people will lime plaster it. Given that it's an old wall, you'd never want to use something that isn't compatible with where the mortar joints or the brick or the stone rubble, whatever the case might be. But whatever material goes onto the wall, it has to be able to allow the wall to dry out. You can't trap moisture. If you do trap moisture, you use the wrong type of plaster, then you can have real problems. I think this was maybe sand cement that was applied onto Victorian building. It's an English project, and the sand cement wasn't compatible with the lime pointing, the mortar joints, and then the moisture that came up through the wall couldn't get out anywhere because of the sand cement, and then you have this sort of problem. So with VISCONN, because it's vapor open and it's going to fully adhere to the substrate, it's not, this sort of issue won't ever happen. It's going to allow any moisture that gets into the wall to get out. Brick is probably our most common application, but it can be done onto CMU as well. There's no issue. It will go straight onto CMU. You just kind of need to pay attention to the different joints. The mortar joints are kind of the area where it can be a little bit tricky to keep airtight or get a better application on. I guess it's the leakier area. Here in Brooklyn, we're seeing a lot of brownstones. I'm sure the Europeans actually think we're pretty crazy to be insulating these sort of walls, because it's quite dangerous if you don't detail it correctly. But it's pretty much been mastered at this stage. We've seen a lot of brownstones where they're now up to passive house levels, and it's been pretty flawless for over the last 10 years. There's a whole load of projects locally that have reached passive house without any issues. So it's good to see. The product also comes in two different colors. It's blue and then dries black, and then there's a white version. So on the bottom left-hand side, you'll see the black has already been applied, it's dried, and then the white is going over it. If you can lime plaster, it's probably always best, or at least use the plaster that is compatible with the mortar joints so that you're not getting any damage. But if there's plaster in place, you should probably just leave it. And then wherever you have tricky areas, or maybe the plaster needs to be repaired, you can use the VISCONN. The VISCONN can go straight onto stucco. It can go onto plaster. It'll apply to almost anything. It can also be plastered over. So if you have any areas where you intend on putting on a plastered finish, the VISCONN can go on initially. So it's fully compatible with stucco. The VISCONN, it will cover gaps between 3/8 of an inch. up to 3/8 of an inch. So there is some limitation with that. So there is an alternative version to the VISCONN called VISCONN fiber, and that basically has some fiber in the material itself, so it still comes paste-like, but it can bridge gaps up to 3/4 of an inch. So anywhere where you have larger gaps, the preparation is what you're going to be, you have to spend a lot of time focusing on that. And the VISCONN fiber was going to clear up any gaps that are 3/4 of an inch. You can also use some of the Proclima tapes. So the tape, if you have kind of a vast area where you need to cover, the tape can be applied. We have a masonry tape called Contiga Solido SL that can go on, and then you can plaster over the tape with the, you can spray apply the VISCONN over the tape. Here is just a quick video of the application. Hope everyone is seeing that. So the black has already been pre-applied, and then the white is going over it. So the reason behind that is to make sure that it's quality control, really, to make sure that you're getting 2 fully adhered layers and everything is completely covered and sealed. Then once the layer is on, you need to back roll the material. So when you spray it, it gets on there, but you'll still find little pinholes. So the back rolling is really the key to getting a full homogeneous layer of the air barrier. And then while it's wet, you measure it. So the VISCONN, it needs to be a minimum of 20 wet mils. You can just use a wet mil thickness gauge. The 20 mils is what will be guaranteed airtight, but the problem can be the substrate. So if you have these older walls where it's uneven and some of it is cracking and that sort of thing, you may need to go a little bit thicker. And some of the specs, we sent the product away for testing at Intertech for ASTM 2178, and it was actually smaller than, or sorry, thinner than our recommended application thickness. It was at 11 wet mils, and once the blower door was applied, there was no leakage at all. So we know once the material gets onto the wall, it's going to be fully sealed, but it's just a matter of making sure that it's completely applied properly and consistent. Water resistance, ASTM E331. That's actually the testing that people use for rain screens. It's not actually what we would recommend for, or sorry, it's not the normal testing procedure for WRBs or that kind of thing. It's for rain screens. So it's one step above what we'd recommend for water barriers. Temperature resistance, -40 to 176. If you live anywhere that goes from -40 degrees Fahrenheit the whole way to 176, you're in for it. It's going to be a tough ride, but at least you know the VISCONN is going to be there with you. It's not going to come off. Vapor variability, it's much like the Intello Plus product, which is a smart vapor retarder. It will never trap moisture. So it varies, the vapor variability varies from 0.3 perms to 25 perms. If your wall ever gets humid and the relative humidity is high, VISCONN will open up and allow it to dry out. There's also a maximum of 3 months UV exposure. So if it is used externally, you know you're going to have it for at least 3 months before the rain screen needs to go on, or the cladding, whatever the case might be. And this is just a video showing how strong and flexible, I guess, the material is. The VISCONN was applied to 2 pieces of Gutex wood fiber insulation. And then here I am with a colleague trying to tear it apart. And it's quite a struggle. So once it gets on, it's pretty durable. It fully impregnates into the substrate. It's not moving. It's very difficult to try and get off. It's quite flexible. You can see there at some stage we were quite a distance apart, and then it snapped. So it can be used, like I said, in a myriad of different applications, but it's extremely durable. It is a certified passive house component. It was tested by PHI. It's, along with the Contiga Solido SL tape, it is a passive house component. So they were tested together. So any of the passive house projects that you're working on, you're guaranteed, I guess, that it's going to be airtight and it's going to do its job. For more information on the specifications, you can check out the spec sheet, but we also have a 3-part spec as well that you can download from the website. If you just go to 475.com, all that information is there. Like I said, it comes in 2 different colors, but it also comes in different forms. It's generally a 10-liter bucket that we'll sell the material in. Then what's new coming next month or thereabouts is the sausage form. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it's a new application, I guess, for smaller, trickier details. So you don't actually have to buy a 10-liter bucket if you're only sealing up some joints. The 10-liter bucket are for where you're maybe applying the material to the party wall or the exterior wall, whatever the case might be, a much larger space. And the VISCONN fiber then comes in a 5-liter bucket in both blue and white, and the sausage form as well. On the left-hand side is the blue dried gone to black, and then the white is applied over it. There's no problems with compatibility. It's the same material, so you can put one layer on and then the next layer will fully adhere to it. Project example, this project is ongoing at the minute. It's the Kane Passive House in Kane, Pennsylvania. I need to give a few shout outs to a couple of people here. Norm Horn is the project manager with Invinity, and he's the one who's kind of doing most of he's not doing the application, but he's the guy on site in the passive house as the passive house tradesperson. The West Penn Power Sustainable Energy Fund, it's their project basically. They're doing all the work. InScale Architects, Moshier Studios, and Cavaliero Painting are doing the actual application of VISCONN. So this was the brick in before the VISCONN was applied. So they needed to actually repoint a lot of this just to make sure that the substrate was solid, that it weren't going to have any issues with the material not bonding or bonding to something that wasn't stable. It's kind of key to applying a liquid applied membrane to have the substrate completely stable. You don't want it to be moving afterwards. So they remove a lot of like the timber joints. You can see some of the timber in the mortar joint there. Anything that could come off should come off with these sort of projects. If it's loose, you need to use a wire brush, you need to use a vacuum, something that's going to get it all off. And then you can either use the VISCONN fiber product or you can repoint it and then apply the material over it. So this is the application of the floor joists. It's something that they were targeting the kind of trickier areas first. And this is the kind of the best use of VISCONN, I think, or at least the one that I see people wanting to use it most about is just trying to get through this transition detail. It's not an enjoyable process trying to get a membrane in between each bay and then start taping it. It can be pretty tricky. Then they focused on the elevator shaft, so they had to pre-apply the VISCONN to where they knew they weren't going to be able to get behind it afterwards. So once that was applied, they were able to continue on up with the CMU block for the elevator shaft. This is the first coat. First coat goes on, and you'd put it on at about 11 to 15 mil, something like that, and then it dries and it shrinks slightly. But if you can see, there's kind of a crack down the middle of the photo of the wall. So that's an area where you should kind of spend a bit more time. You can use the VISCONN fiber, or you can apply a bit more of the VISCONN over it, as long as it's no more than 3/8 of an inch. Then as the second layer goes on, we have a second installer here who was back rolling the material just to make sure that all those little pinholes are sealed up. We've been asked a lot about this new product and we don't even have it in stock yet. So in Germany, it's already been sold. This is basically it's a gun application for the VISCONN sausages. It's attached to an air compressor, and then it can be used for much smaller locations like floor to wall details, around services. You can even apply it to around the window frame. I've seen them do it in Germany. So they'll put insulation around the window and then they'll spray this between the window and the jamb or the membrane or whatever the detail is. The initial release we're hoping is going to be April. So as soon as we have it in stock, there will be a limited supply. If you are interested in it, let us know. The VISCONN initially is just going to be the black, So there's blue and dries black, and then the white will be available shortly afterwards. So come the end of March, we'll be announcing when we're actually going to have it. If you are interested in it, let us know. Reach out to us on Instagram, YouTube. You can also get our emails, or just send us a message, info@475.com. This is what it's going to look like as you're installing the material or you're getting it ready to go. The sausage goes into the tube, then you cut open the tip of the sausage, and then the head goes on. And there's basically two different, there's the plastic endings that you're seeing, they're basically dials to be able to change from a caulk application to a spray application. It's just attached to an air compressor, and then you can see the application here where it's spray applied and then caulk applied. It's a matter of just changing the plastic head. You just rotate it ever so slightly. Again, if you're interested in it, let us know. There is only a short supply, so the sooner we know about it, the more we can prepare and the more we can get in. But as I said, we've had people reaching out already, and it's already quite hyped coming from Germany. I guess we've got a lot of people asking about it. And that's basically it. So thank you for your time, everyone.
Thanks, Aaron, for the presentation. Yeah, so we would take some of the questions.
No. And okay. I think Johnny went responding to questions, so he took my job away.
I'm sorry. I can tell you which ones haven't been addressed so far. We got a number of questions about thickness, measuring thickness, things like that. So are there issues if thickness is applied, if there's too much material on the wall, if it's applied too thickly, and how do you measure it with a gauge?
Okay. There's no real issue if you apply it too thick. It takes longer to dry. It won't trap any moisture. It's vapor open. So it's not like the thicker it goes, the harder it will be. It might be a little bit slower, but because of how vapor open it gets, it's always going to let vapor to dry out. And then the wet mill's thickness gauge, if I can maybe go back to it. So when the material is wet, you press the card. It's almost like a credit card, and you press it in. It comes off, and then you get a piece of paper, or you get something that you can kind of measure it. As you drag it back along the paper, you'll see which thickness it actually is. It's kind of hard to. I don't really have a good way of showing it here, but it needs to go on a minimum of 20 mils. So along the top bar here, you can see the 20 mils. If it's at 20 mils, as you drag along, you won't, the other thicknesses, you won't be able to see it. They won't be marked. So each little tail, I guess here, they will either be in the material or they won't. And if they're not, it's at that point that it'll show itself on the paper. It's really simple. I'm probably not doing a good job of explaining it, but if somebody needs one of these, we can send them. We have them here in the office.
Does the material react exothermically during curing?
You know, I'm not even sure what that word is.
Yeah.
But it dries. It dries, and that's what changes the color. I don't know if.
Yeah, my understanding.
I think it means if it heats up, basically. So if there's a reaction, chemical reaction which produces heat.
Oh no, no, there's no issue. There is application temperatures that you need to be within a certain period. It shouldn't be too cold. The material it's acrylic and water based, so it could freeze in transit maybe, or if it was left on a job site over winter, it could freeze. But as long as the application temperature, I think it's maybe between 40 degrees and 90 degrees. So as long as you're in that range, you're pretty good to go.
Mm-hmm. And everyone on the call, you are allowed to unmute yourself. So if you want to do a follow-up question, you could do so by unmuting yourself.
Next one was, would the product work on the interior side of a basement wall below grade, and What about hydrostatic pressure of moisture buildup behind the roll-on coating in the basement?
Yeah, so generally with those basements, you want something vapor closed, or if it's a new build, you're going to see something that's much more vapor tight. The VISCONN is vapor open, so it's going to, at some point, it will let vapor pass through, but it is watertight. So we would say if it's like a new build, you should probably go with something vapor tight for your basement. If you're just looking to use it as part of your air barrier, it can absolutely be applied on a basement wall, probably on the interior. What was the second question, Johnny?
So in that basement application, a hydrostatic pressure behind and moisture buildup behind the coating. So I think you kind of addressed that, is like, yeah, if it's a situation where you're expecting a lot of moisture buildup, you don't want that, yeah, vapor openness.
So it's liquid water that you kind of have to worry about there. So if you should have a completely vapor tight material, I would say, for water.
And then let's see, there was, is the 20 mil coverage easily capable while spraying with one coat? I understand the coverage of two coats is more to assure full coverage. On the Gutex or on a homogeneous material, could you get away with one coat? And also, when spraying two coats, are you trying to get to the 20 mil coating in total?
Yeah, it's kind of dependent on the substrate, really. So if you have a particularly rough substrate, it's hard to, you have to go thicker, basically. If it's, the brick is kind of uneven and not level, which it's going to be in most cases, you have to go substantially thicker than if it was like going on to plywood. You can go pretty thin with the application on plywood. We just have to, say at some minimum, this is the application. If it's going on to Gutex, you could probably get away with less. It would be air and water tight, but we would still say it has to be 20 wet mils, just because we know that's what it's tested at.
And ooh, lots of questions coming in now. So question about price, basically asking how it might compare to other materials that achieve the same thing. I'm wondering if we would have something that we compare it to. I feel like we're most often comparing air sealing to not air sealing at all. So
right, yeah. I don't really. It's always in the range of other materials. I guess the key is that it's part of the Proclima system. So when you're buying Proclima, it comes with product discounts or project discounts. So it's always going to be within the same range as other liquid applied membranes. But there's obviously discounts for when you use all of Proclima.
Can the VISCONN be used in conjunction with Tescon Vanna and the rest of the Proclima system?
Yeah, absolutely. So some people will apply it onto some substrates where they know they have maybe a membrane coming down and there's like concrete, and they know they need to prime this layer because the Vanna, you don't want to stick the Vanna to dust, basically. So you clean that away. You can prime the coating with, you can prime the substrate with the VISCONN and then tape directly to the VISCONN.
And the question about being available in New Zealand, I don't know if this product is available in New Zealand, but contact you have a fabulous Proclima center in New Zealand, so they'll know the answer to that, but I'm pretty sure you could get it.
I don't think it's available yet in New Zealand, but ask.
In the windows, do we do inside and outside or just inside?
It depends on your air barrier strategy. So if your air barrier is on the inside and you have a membrane, well then you would apply it on the inside. But it's kind of subject to what the overall strategy is. You just need to be careful when you're taping around or sealing around your windows. You want to tape off the window first with some sort of sheet. Make sure you have a good substrate in between the rough opening and the window, and then you can apply it over.
And a note from Peter here, don't use the mill gauge on the mortar joint or uneven masonry. Make sure you get a good flat surface. Thanks, yep. Peter. We have Jeff Betts. In window and door installation, if you're looking for non-tape/foil waterproofing solution, not the weather sealing from the rough opening to the window unit, but the waterproofing at the rough opening unit itself, can this substitute for a product such as Prosoco Fast Flash? The main concern, I suppose, is if it's appropriate for the application and has been tested for application. If so, was it tested to AAMA 7 to 11 at 25 mil thickness?
No, it hasn't been tested to that yet. If you are putting it on a sill, it should be a pitch sill. It needs to be at least a minimum of 5 degrees. We've seen it applied in that application, but we have not tested it to that yet. Yeah, it's in the works.
Can VISCONN be applied to old but stable paint? And
yes. So generally what you do, you get a wire brush, or you get something that you can take off whatever will come loose. So if you can wipe it off with your hand, then it's not stable. If it stays on after a wire brush, then you can apply the VISCONN over it. And while on the topic, you can also paint the VISCONN. So I've seen some people apply the VISCONN as the air barrier onto their wall, and then someone will come along and paint it. Depending on the finish that you're looking for. If you have the black material, it could take you a lot of layers of paint to try and get a happy finish. So you'll be looking at using the white VISCONN.
Is the application reversible, especially in regard to how historic commissions see it and historic tax credit, or like any preservation committees maybe that you have heard about interacting with this?
Yeah, I don't really know anything about the tax credits or anything like that. But the VISCONN, once it's on, it's not reversible. It's on for good. You'd really need like a blower torch to really get it off.
Then once the product dries, is there a temperature issue? And I just looked that up just to clarify. Application temperature is between 41 Fahrenheit and 95 Fahrenheit. So basically it can't be low temperatures, but it can be pretty high. And long-term temperature resistance after drying is between -40 Fahrenheit and 176. So shouldn't be any issue there unless you're talking about putting it at a place where you've got like a boiler right next to it or something like that.
Right, correct.
And then can it be used for gypsum board?
Yeah, you can apply it onto gypsum, no problem. Because it's almost self-priming, you just need to clean the surface and then spray apply it. Whereas sometimes with gypsum board, because of it's kind of fibrous and kind of dusty in nature, you would probably have to prime it and then tape. That's the general application. So this can go straight onto gypsum board.
But I would also imagine in terms of gypsum board, we like recommending AERO as well.
If it's exterior gypsum and that's the approach that you're going with, AERO would be the product that we would recommend. It's a WRB.
How does VISCONN compare to Stow Gold?
Similar in performance. I don't know the exact specs on Stow Gold, but because it's part of the ProClima system, you're getting a full warranted system. You can be guaranteed that any of the Vanna or the Contiga HF tapes, the Contiga tapes or Contiga HF, they're all going to be warranted with the full system warranty, which is 10 years. So that's the reason why you would go with VISCONN as part of the 475 ProClima system.
And then the next one, once dried, is UV a concern if it's going to be exposed for a long period of time? And I have the specs up, so I can tell you that the maximum is 3 months UV and weather exposure. And of course, long term, you would want to have that covered. Yeah. Can VISCONN be applied with a normal paint roller?
Yes. Yeah, there's no problem. the general application is with an airless sprayer. So if you're doing something small, you can literally open up the can, get a brush, get a roller, and apply it. There's no issue with that.
And is this going to take over from membrane/tapes as primary air tightness? Is there any airtight places in the house where you would not use VISCONN?
Again, it depends on your overall strategy. Some people, depending on who's involved, whether it's the architect, whether it is the installers, there's kind of a whole lot of different things that come into play here. I would say it's not going to be the primary air barrier in most cases, because if it's an old building, the substrate is quite rough, and it's hard to make that layer your primary air barrier. You have to put on, probably somewhere between 20 and 40 wet mils of material, so it can become maybe cost prohibitive. But you would use it in combination with a sheet membrane to really get you over the edge to meet 0.6 or underneath 1 air change per hour, depending on the application. So I would say it's not going to replace a sheet membrane in most cases, but it's a useful tool to use with a sheet membrane.
Yeah, and I would say probably just in terms of exterior membranes in general, exterior is usually going to be easier to just wrap the house than, you're probably not going to want to do this on the rooftop. We're always going to have membranes as a rooftop membrane.
Yeah, so I would like to thank Aaron and John for the fantastic presentation. Go and get your instruments. I think that seems like a very convincing product everyone should have. Thanks, Jose, for emceeing it. And yeah, you are allowed to unmute yourself. You stick around a little bit. We're going to be around for 5-10 minutes. You can say hello or ask some more specific questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.